This episode of Pool Magazine podcast is proudly sponsored by Riverflow, whose award-winning current system is the industry-recognized preferred solution for creating a variety of exciting swim environments. From lazy rivers to sports pools, from residential to commercial, you'll find a Riverflow pump at the heart of many of today's most noteworthy pool projects. To learn more, visit us on the web at riverflowpumps.com.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Trusty, and today I'm chatting with Albert Melo, co-owner of Melos Pools and Outdoors. They're an award-winning pool builder who are doing some big things in the high-end luxury market and making a reputation for themselves as a local leader in Palm Springs. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show, Albert.
Thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure.
For those who may not know Melos Pools and Outdoors yet, how would you describe what you do? I mean, what makes you guys different in Palm Springs specifically?
Yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot that we can unpack here, but what really sets us apart is the fact that we have kind of built a name for taking on projects that maybe most of our competitors do not want to get involved with just due to how complex they are, or maybe they're just too early in the stage of the design. We work a lot with, high-end architects, high-end builders, designers, and a lot of the times we get involved early on and, in the early phases of the project. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what sets us apart, that we're willing to take our time and be involved and answer maybe 100 questions before we're even able to provide a price for the project. And that's something that has really helped our company grow in the last few years and just kind of build a reputation around that.
Yeah, I've seen your body of work, some really truly impressive projects. I mean, it seems like you go near the high-end luxury stuff that nobody really wants to touch.
That's exactly it. See, and what's interesting, Joe, and it's something we can spend a lot of time on, but this didn't happen naturally. But over the years, what we've done, our company, in a way, kind of services two different markets. So we do developments, which is obviously the volume side of the pool industry, where in some developments you're building 30, sometimes up to 60 pools, but we also do really high-end projects. And I think what works well for that is any builder out there that's worked in complicated projects, they understand that there's really big gaps of waiting time. I've had jobs where waiting 3 months for the homeowner and the architect and the designer to select the pool tile.
Yeah.
So how do you keep your guys busy, especially because we like to do a lot of our work in house? How do you keep 40 guys busy at all times? And we found that by having developments where you systemize that process, we're able to, keep our guys full time. And yeah, so again, we do the high end, but we also do developments and projects that move at a really fast rate.
Based on the research that I've done on you, I know that you studied civil engineering before eventually gravitating back into your family business.
That's correct.
What was it that kind of pulled you back into swimming pools and outdoor living, if I can ask you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a story that I like to share with people, especially, with some younger cousins and nephews that I've mentored over the years. I remember those days where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. It's a long story, but essentially what happened is I always knew that I liked construction. I was drawn to construction as a kid. I remember just being in the car and seeing a construction site and just being drawn by it, but I didn't know what that meant. And then I found myself my senior year sitting down with my counselor. He's like, "So what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he gave me a form, and one of the options was civil engineering. And I just filled that out. And before you know it, I'm off to college in Fullerton, California, which is the Orange County area in California. And I went to school for civil engineering. But one of the big things, it was a big moment in my life. By my third year of studying civil engineering, I found myself not bored because I was very busy studying, but I just found myself so sucked into the books and just studying. And I was like, okay, there has to be more to this. And on my own, I remember just Googling, top home builders in the Orange County area. And essentially what I did is I maybe called 15, 20 builders, and I told them that I wanted to work for them and learn from them. And no one called me back. But I remember calling this one office, and the girl who answered happened to be the daughter of the owner of the company. And she said, "Hey, listen, if you want to talk to my dad, he's the first one here at 5:30 in the morning every day. I mean, that's the only way you're going to be able to pin him down. So I showed up the next morning and he says, "So what do you want to do, Albert?" I showed up at 5:30. He was the first one to, sure enough, the first one to pull up to the office. And I told him, "Hey, I just want to learn from the best and I want to get my feet wet." And this is the moment that kind of changed everything for me. I remember being 3 years into my degree, going into my fourth year. And after a few weeks, his name was Robert. Robert pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, Albert, I'm going to tell you something." He's like, "I don't think you're an engineer." And I'm like, "What do you mean? That's what I'm studying. I'm going to become an engineer." He's like, "No." He's like, "You're going to be a great businessman one day." And I remember just being very confused about it. So the next day he takes me and he shows me what his engineers were doing. At the time, they're structural engineers, the guys who were engineering the homes. And what he was trying to show me that most engineers are in an office all day. And he quickly realized that I liked meeting people. I liked interacting with people. I liked being on the job sites and talking to the vendors and meeting the clients. And I remember just going home so discouraged. I'm like, this guy's telling me I should not be an engineer. I'm like, I've just wasted all these years of college. But it turned out to be the best thing ever because, just to keep it short, I obviously finished school because I had 1 year left. But I remember once you graduate from civil engineering, you need to get ready for a big test, which is your PE, so you can become a licensed engineer. And I'm ready to, sign up for this test. Everyone, all my classmates are getting ready for this test. And one of my closest cousins at the time passed away, and that just kind of shook everything up with our family. And I was just like, there's no way I can study. There's no way I can get ready for this. So my dad said, "Hey, why don't you just come back to the desert for the summer and, just work with me during the summer?" And at the time, my dad was doing pool service, pool repairs, some remodeling, a few new constructions, but it was a very small operation. It was pretty much just him. And so I went back with him that summer and I have not left. It's been 12 years and I never left, never became an engineer, and never got my license. But, I look back at this, Joe, and I don't think it was a waste of time. It's actually gone back. It's helped me tremendously to be able to work on these projects that we're talking about, and just to be able to take that knowledge and use it with architects and structural engineers and, the city inspectors and, the entire team that it takes to build some of these, high-end luxury homes. So, yeah, that's kind of the background story on that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I mean, it's definitely not the first time that I heard that somebody who went to college realized, halfway down that path that maybe they were on the road less traveled.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
I mean, you work in a very discerning market. I mean, homeowners in Palm Springs tend to be pretty design savvy. I mean, for your experience, how does that kind of change the way those first conversations usually go?
Yeah, for those who know the Palm Springs area, and we say Palm Springs, that's obviously one city within the Coachella Valley. A lot of people know it by the Coachella Valley due to, all the festivals like Coachella, Stagecoach, but Palm Springs is known worldwide for the mid-century architecture. So, you have some of the most famous architects from the 1950s, 1960s in the Palm Springs area. So in Palm Springs, it's all about respecting that mid-century architecture. But then you move towards La Quinta, Palm Desert area, which is about 20, 30 minutes away from Palm Springs, and it's a really high-end luxury, some of the most prestige golf courses in the country, gated communities. And there we're working a lot with, the zero edge pools and the infinity edges, and, these massive entry water features at the driveway, and then another water feature at the entry of the home. And yeah, so it's definitely an area that it's heavily controlled by the looks of things and the design of the home. And I joke with my wife, half of the pools we built, they don't get used. It's more for looks, right? It's more to enjoy the outdoors and maybe your cup of coffee in the morning, a glass of wine at night. And so yeah, so the design really drives everything out here.
Well, I know in the past you've talked about how your firm is developing a reputation for taking on those kind of projects. What kind of work are you tackling right now that you feel kind of separates you from the pack in that regard?
Yeah, we're starting to do a lot of NDA projects, where unfortunately they don't let you discuss these projects. But, a lot of this stuff is the way it works is we get an email or a call, our office does, saying, hey, we just bought this amazing lot, in this community. And, you've built a pool for this friend of mine, or, you were recommended by the architect. He's like, we're going to use you no matter what, but we just need to get you involved early on. And a lot of people would say, wow, you're working for free, or that's a waste of time. And yeah, at times that does happen, but with these kind of clients, they just want things done right. So what happens is we get involved super early, Joe, and sometimes we answer a ton of emails. I do 3 or 4 Zoom meetings, don't hear from them for like a year. And then a year later that, we get that call and say, okay, we're ready to go, and just send us the contract. So we take a lot of pride in those kind of jobs where there's a lot of back end homework, a lot of strategizing, a lot of back and forth between every party involved. And yeah, so those are some of the cool projects that we get to be a part of.
When you entered the family business, I know this kind of work wasn't on the radar. I mean, was there a moment where you conscientiously leaned into this type of work where you said, this is what we're going to be known for, even knowing that this kind of work comes with more personal risk from a reputation standpoint and in terms of the time that you have to commit to working on these large projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it naturally just happened, right? It was one of those things, Joe. When I first joined my dad, the first 5 years, I just became obsessed with the business side of things. And, what does that mean? Essentially, I became obsessed with how to be more efficient, how to create a better experience to the client, how to create a better sales process, how to create a better construction process. And, when you become obsessed with that, and that just becomes the goal in everything that you do, from the way we answer the phone call to the way, we presented the designs, it's a long process. If for those who are in the pool industry, they understand, sometimes it can be years and years from the day you take that first call all the way to the end. I just became obsessed with getting better and better. And even if that meant every day just improving 1%. And eventually, 5, 6, 7 years later, my wife always says it felt like one long day for us, but it was really 7 years where I just put my head down and worked really hard. You kind of put your head up one day and you go, wow, you're naturally just start attracting, you know, that clientele that really wants quality, that really wants someone who takes pride in what you do. And sure, in the beginning, it was hard because you compete with a lot of guys that don't see it that way, and they're just throwing numbers out there that are not realistic, or they're throwing out timelines that are not realistic. And something I'm constantly telling my team is integrity, integrity over everything, right? We will never lie, we will never overpromise just to get a contract signed. If anything, we do the opposite. We set the expectations early, we tell them the truth, and we say, no, this is not going to take 2 months like you want it to take. Just the permitting process is going to take 2 months. The construction process can take another 6 months. And sometimes there are clients that don't want to hear that. And guess what they do? They walk away and they go with that other company that maybe told them what they wanted to hear. So it's one of those things that it was a process, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we started losing a lot of jobs because we were just being upfront with people with the budget, upfront with people with the timeline. But at the same time, there are those clients that appreciate that, and they value that, and they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to understand that in order to build a Ferrari, it takes time. It's not how fast can you do it. It's let's do this right. Let's plan ahead. It's going to cost more, but it's going to be done right. So yeah, it was just a natural process that kind of took place over the years.
Sure. I mean, well, in vetting those clients, here's a good follow-up question to that. When one of these really challenging projects comes your way and you know it's going to be tremendously difficult to execute, what
Yeah.
has to be true about that client relationship that you're building before you commit to working with them?
Yeah, that client has to see the value in what our company offers. And if they don't, I mean, trust me, they will walk away, right? But if they see the value on what we bring to the table, so for example, a lot of these big homes, even though, some of these homes are 10, 15, $20 million, they still have a budget. So early on, what they do is they create a concept, the architect and them, and they say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking of doing. Where are we? What's a ballpark number, right? So a lot of times we'll say, hey, you're in between 400 to 600,000 for this. And we're able, and then they're like, well, you know what, we need a valley engineer, or you know what, that's within our budget. But we spend a lot of time answering those questions, and if they see the value that we're able to help them early on, and that we know what we're doing, and that we're going to bring the right vendors into their project, we're going to bring the right engineers and the right package to their project to accomplish what they want, then they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to wait for, the realistic timeline that we give them.
Just going through some of the beautiful photos our mutual friend Jimmy Smith took of some of your pool projects, and I'm stuck on the Videra project. I hope that is not a big surprise there. I know you're not shying away from working with new materials, especially when it comes to those high-end projects. You've been recognized for work involving acrylic pool walls. I mean, from your perspective, what do people tend to underestimate about working with projects like that with acrylic at that level?
Yeah, that was a unique project. I think the amount of details and coordinating that it's going to take, you got to bring obviously the acrylic vendor, and we've always used Titan Aquatics. Dustin over there, he's been great to work with, but there's so much planning involved. There's so many what ifs. There's so many unknowns. It's not your typical 30 by 15 pool, just dig, steel, plumbing, and gunning within a week, right? It takes emails and emails. I believe this project, we were close to almost 2,000 emails when it was said and done, between the client and everyone involved. So it's going to take a lot of patience, and a lot of coordinating between everyone. And another thing we take pride in, Joe, is we have an in-house CAD designer. And the reason why we like to do that, so we can control our plans and control very detailed cross sections that are able to set the vision, for the engineers and the architects when we're working on this. So this specific project you're referring to, I remember, I mean, and these clients were amazing early on. They were like, Albert, we want something different. We want something unique. And ideas were being thrown out at the table. And one of the ideas they threw out was like, we kind of want to create like a floating bar. And at the time, we're like, what does that mean? Right. So we thought of, hey, what if we do an acrylic wall so you can see people on the bar side? And then we said, what if we make the table out of acrylic? And at the time, I didn't know anyone that had done an acrylic table floating over the pool. And it was just a process that began to evolve even throughout that process. You need to provide somewhat of a budget to the client, but you also need to understand how that's going to be constructed. So you're almost working backwards. So I'm constantly on the phone with structural engineer, and I'm calling my structural engineer and saying, hey, what if we do this? What if we do that? Oh, okay. So you need to know how deep the pool is going to be. Okay, let me call my client. How deep do you guys want the pool? So there's a lot of coordination between everyone. And then eventually you do these detailed plans, and it comes to life.
I was reading a Palm Springs Life feature about one of your projects, and you talked about checking on that wall multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, deep
Gotcha.
down, you were thinking, that glass better hold. I want to bring that up because it really captures the pressure behind these types of high-end builds. I mean, what was that night like for you? And you still have that same kind of anxiety when tackling projects of that nature today?
Joe, it's funny you bring that up because I mean, gosh, it's been 10 years now. That was my first acrylic pool that we had ever done. And, I had heard of acrylic pools, but it's different when you have to build your first one. And I remember, the day that we were filling that pool, I just cannot relax. I'm like, what if it leaks? What if it fails? You know, Trying to understand how much pressure, all that pressure of the water, is it going to deflect that acrylic? Is it going to create deflection? All worst case scenarios are going through my mind. And I remember it was late at night. I'm like, you know what? I cannot relax. I'm not going to be able to sleep. So I drove all the way out there, and I remember it was halfway through the acrylic, and there was no leaks, and it was almost there. And yeah, I mean, obviously, anyone that's been in this industry, everyone remembers their first infinity edge pool, their first zero edge pool, and with time and experience comes confidence. And now we're very confident in what we do, and over the years we've learned from our mistakes. Some mistakes have cost us tremendously, but that's how you learn, and we're always looking to improve. But I'm proud to say that now we kind of handle our complicated projects with a lot more confidence than that first one.
Another great project I came across, again, in a feature with Palm Springs Life, was the pool that you designed around existing palm trees instead of removing them. I mean, most builders that I know would have just moved the trees or gotten rid of them altogether, but you went the opposite direction. And I
Yeah.
wanted to ask about that decision and what it says about your design philosophy. I mean, what was important to you and your clients in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the Palm Springs, right? Palm Springs is all about mid-century. It's all about the palms. And there's something very known in Palm Springs that's called twin palms. You'll see a lot of two palms together. And these palms, they must have been there from, I mean, originally from the 50s, 60s. And, when we were working on this design, we said we have to keep these palms. I mean, it's a signature move of look of Palm Springs. And I remember, one of the challenges was, are these palms are they gonna fall once we dig the pool? But we did everything we could on our end to make sure that we can keep those in place. And I'm glad that we were able to. And, the final product is this huge modernized pool. Yet in the middle of that, you have these old palms that have been there for over 4 decades. So that was definitely a fun project.
Well, I want to lean into that a little bit. I mean, in your market of Palm Springs, how does the surrounding architecture and influence the way that you design a pool?
Yeah, I would say that, Palm Springs and its modern slash mid-century look, it's what governs the whole design of the pool. And sometimes we have to work a lot with the interior designers because they want to make sure that everything in the house flows and integrates into the outdoors. So it's what drives the overall design of the pool. And a lot of times the challenge with that is some of these pools are 40, 50 years old, so structurally, they're not sound. Structurally, we need to maybe retrofit some of the pool. But whenever we do that, we always keep that Palm Springs mid-century concept in mind.
Well, I want to ask this question because I see it evident in a lot of your work, and I know that there's a lot of restraint in terms of, what you can do with the pool versus, what is acceptable to the rest of the landscape and surrounding architecture. And I ask this question because I saw it in practice during this year's $1 million Pool Challenge in Las Vegas. But from your experience, do you think restraint, knowing when not to do something, is an underrated part of high-end pool design?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the challenge sometimes is, when you're working with these really big architects and, successful clients, they don't want to hear the word no, right? They have an idea, and it's our job to figure out how it gets done and what it's required for it to get done, right? Like a perfect example, Joe, something that we've been doing more than ever in the last few years is everyone wants to have a big entry water feature at the entrance of the house, right? And they want it to look as if it's part of the house structure. But one of the challenges we have is the landscape architect may show a water feature right against the house, but the structural engineer of the home never really thought much about that process and what it's going to take. So they design their structural footing to stick out, let's say 12 to 18 inches. Well, the intent is to have that water look flush. So that's where we come in. And a lot of times the homeowners have to pay the structural engineer to redo the structural engineering of the house. So that way they can design a footing that instead of it going outside, it goes into the house, and it gives us room to be able to flush our structural wall with the wall of the house. And it's just challenges like that we're constantly running into. And obviously with time we've gotten better at bringing those concerns early on, so we can try to avoid having to have the structural engineer redo all their calcs. But that's the stuff that we are constantly dealing with on our end for these high-end homes.
Well, Every builder I talk to talks about having a process, and that's easy enough to accomplish when you're a production builder. But from your side, what does that actually look like at Mellows Pools when virtually every pool project that you're going to work on comes along as a custom job?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is going back to what we were discussing earlier. Are we the right fit for them? And, and usually that starts with the phone call or a Zoom meeting. And when I say the right fit, it goes back to, are they realistic with the timeline? Are they understanding that, this is going to take a process? So after that first call, I think both parties on their end and our end are able to determine if we are. And then if we are, then we start, usually the first thing we ask for is some idea, some site plan, some concept. Sometimes we just see a bubble sketch concept. What it is just a piece of paper with bubbles and just hand drawn pools. And it might just say, this is where the house is going to go, this is where the pool is going to go, this is what we want. And then from there we take it on and we say, hey, these are the things that we need to know from the civil engineer, these are the things we need to know from the structural engineer, these are the things we need to know from the architect. And then we're able to take that and kind of put an initial design and proposal together for them.
Well, you mentioned before that a lot of your builds are prolonged in their timelines. I mean, how do you make sure that customer experience stays strong when your builds are long and the process can have start and stops that last months, sometimes years before you're truly complete with the project?
Yeah, that's definitely something that gets challenging at times. I probably have a good 5 or 10 projects right now where it's been a year, some of them 2 years, and we're just waiting to come back. So most of the time, what we do is we get our pools, our water features, our spas to the structural shell of gunite, and then they just sit there until the house is vertical, and then the house is far enough to a point where we can come back. But so what we do is we try to stay in contact with the builders, with the architects by, sending emails, or if we have a project nearby, I personally like to stop by and just check in on the projects, shake hands, and my project managers do as well. So we try to keep that communication alive even when we're waiting and just waiting on them to get back to us.
Well, I saw another feature with you in the 40 under 40. I mean, you achieved a lot at relatively a young age. I mean, what still challenges you or keeps you on your toes today?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Anyone that's ran a business, they know that the day you think you have it all figured out is when you don't, because I'm constantly learning, constantly growing. I give a lot of credit to the fact that I've never been scared to ask questions. I'm the first one to say I don't know, and not only in the pool industry side of things, but in the business side of things. And I feel blessed enough that my clients who I've built pool for, I built such a good relationship with that they become friends. And a lot of those friends, clients have become my mentors. So I have 4 to 5 clients who run very successful businesses, some of them up in the 200, $300 million businesses. And they're the people that I can call any day, anytime and say, hey, what do I do here? They guide me on the financial side of the business. And, that's been very helpful. Obviously, we have to really understand how a pool works, the hydraulics, and how to build a pool. But I think one of the sides that most pool builders ignore is how to run a business. And thankfully, I surrounded myself around the right people that are willing to share their knowledge and their mistakes. And that's really been a huge part of our success, is just to understand that, yes, we are building pools, but we're also running a business and we got to make sure we take care of that side. But I'm constantly, reading and learning and growing to make sure that we're always evolving and innovating with, especially with all the technology stuff that's always changing out there.
Well, looking ahead, what excites you most right now? I mean, what are you most looking forward to? Is it working on your business, in your business? What's most motivating you right now?
Yeah, I think what I'm very excited for is, the first 10 years of this business, well, it was, hey, let's build the business, let's build a brand, let's build a name. What I'm excited for the next 10 years is really kind of, controlling our growth. Growth sometimes can be a double-edged sword. It just makes sure we maintain our quality and finding our sweet spot. And I think where we are right now, it's really our sweet spot where we're busy, but we're not busy to the point that it's gonna affect our quality. So I'm just excited for these next 10 years to just take on a lot of these cool and challenging projects, and also being able to say no to the ones that maybe don't fit our values and don't fit the kind of work that we want to do.
Well, Albert, I want to thank you for taking time out today to chat with us and sharing your mindset behind the work you're doing. I really appreciate how open you were about the drive and discipline that goes into taking on these kinds of high-end luxury projects.
Of course. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me on, and it's my pleasure.
Well, for anyone listening who wants to see what all this looks like in practice, you'll find several of their projects featured in the spring issue of Pool Magazine. As always, thanks for listening in. Make sure to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast.
This episode of Pool Magazine Podcast is proudly sponsored by Riverflow, whose award-winning current system is the industry-recognized preferred solution for creating a variety of exciting swim environments. From lazy rivers to sports pools, from residential to commercial, you'll find a Riverflow pump at the heart of many of today's most noteworthy pool projects. To learn more, visit us on the web at riverflowpumps.com.